Let's go to a player who could be on his way out of the Emirates rather than his way in, which is Matteo Guendouzi. The 21-year-old has been training by himself since that Brighton game where he popped off at Neil Maupay. And Mikel Arteta has made it clear publicly that Guendouzi will either get on board or will be moved on. He obviously has been a little bit of a problem this season generally. Had a bust up with Socrates, I think, during some warm weather training back in the spring. And apparently some of the coaching staff have also had issues with him. But despite these problems, it doesn't look like he's going to be short of suitors. We've seen him linked with Man United, Barcelona, PSG, Liverpool, Atletico Madrid, and Lyon over the last couple of weeks. Do you like Guendouzi, Dukes? Because I feel like now he's on the back pages. It's been really interesting to see who is a Guendouzi fan and who is not.
I'm kind of... he seems like most people are quite strong on him either way. He seems like quite a Marmite player, but I'm actually very much in the middle. I'm quite disappointed in that he seems to have thrown away an opportunity to really establish himself at Arsenal, a club that has done a lot for him. Like, he was playing in Ligue 2 before they bought him for £8 million from Lorient. Gave him a lot of football last year. And he's played regularly until Arteta's arrival. And it seems like Arteta's looking for a slightly different type of midfielder. Like, Guendouzi seemed to profit and play very well under the sort of chaos of the Emery system, where there was massive gaps between midfield and defence and between midfield and attack. It was really unstructured, really against what a lot of people thought Emery was going to bring to the club. And Guendouzi seemed to be this sort of crazy guy that you could make him, really press on a player for a game. He could really, hold his line as well. He would just do whatever job Emery seemingly wanted from him with 100% enthusiasm and 100% commitment. But now Arteta's come in and he seems to have brought Xhaka back into the fold. I think Xhaka's played really well in the last couple of months. I think Ceballos has shown some great form since the resumption as well, particularly in that game against Spurs at the weekend, where I thought he was really unlucky to finish up on the losing side. He was really controlling midfield. He was the one, on both sides that was offering the sort of most forward balls, really incisive passing. So I thought he looked, some of the best form he's shown in an Arsenal shirt. But Guendouzi, just a bit disappointing. Apparently he showed a real lack of contrition after the Brighton game, where he'd antagonised Maupay to such an extent, and he ended up being dragged off by his own club staff. Arteta was like, this is not the sort of player and attitude we want at Arsenal when he's trying to build this new culture around the side. So he's only really got himself to blame. And then there was talk about him being Guendouzi on a trip to Dubai as well and getting his top off in a restaurant, which, of all the places to do it, you don't want to be doing that in Dubai with their rules about drinking. But statistically, there are parts of his game that I think look quite promising. He's producing about 3 tackles and interceptions per 90, and he gets fouled regularly, which is something that I hadn't really taken into account until, Pat, you did this research for this podcast. But he's getting fouled close to 3 times a game. Over 1 dribble a match as well at 21. Suggests he's got a really sort of good ball carrying ability, and he does thrive in certain situations in games, as I sort of said before. But Pat, have you seen enough from him to, you've seen some glorious Arsenal midfielders over the years that could do the destructive side of the game and the more sort of pretty on the eye, the thread of the eye of the needle balls, etc. Do you see enough of Guendouzi to suggest that he could really become the all-round midfielder that Arsenal need?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's only 21. And that's the thing that I think people always forget. They kind of say, oh, well, he's been at Arsenal now for nearly 2 years, so he should be, playing. He should be one of the better midfielders in the league or something. And I think he's 21. Like, there's more than enough here to warrant a place in the squad. It doesn't guarantee him a starting spot by any means, but as you said, like, his defensive numbers are okay. They could definitely improve, but the fact that he can dribble a decent amount, I think, is really promising. And he's a really good passer. He's completing 85% of his long balls this season, which is actually the best mark in the squad. He's second in the squad for passes into the final third, just behind Xhaka, with about 7 a game, which actually ranks really highly in the league. Only Ozil plays more progressive passes than him per 90. And I think, you've seen him really take charge of some games this season. Like, I think the Spurs game at home in the autumn. Yeah, and then the one where we were down to 10 men and we beat Villa at home 3-2. Both of those games, he just really took charge, and I was really impressed by that. And to be able to do that, I think at that point he was still 20. To be able to do that at 20 is quite impressive. Like, I mean, we've had some amazing midfielders at the Emirates, but I can't, apart from Fabregas and Wilshere, it's hard to think of players who were as developed as Guendouzi at such a young age. Like, I truly think that goes unremarked upon so much of the time. Like, positionally, he's still all over the place, and he 100% needs to learn that, and he definitely needs to learn some discipline. But I think that there's enough talent there that you'd say we want to keep him and develop it, unless you've got a really good opportunity. Like, if somebody offers big money for him this summer, I can understand taking it if you know what you can do with that money. And for instance, with the Lyon rumour, there's now like talk that maybe Arsenal want Aouar and Lyon want Guendouzi, and maybe you could swap Guendouzi and a little bit of cash for Aouar. I think that would make a lot of sense, because Aouar actually fits a bigger need in the Arsenal squad right now. But when you see stuff like, oh, maybe he could go to Atletico Madrid in exchange for Thomas Partey, I think that's ridiculous. Thomas Partey is 27. Guendouzi is 21. I think it's absolutely ludicrous to suggest that would be a sensible move for Arsenal, because we've talked about this before, but by the time that Arsenal's promising young attackers like Saka and Martinelli are hitting 22, 23 and really getting into their peak years, Partey would need to be replaced because he'll be 31. And I think quite often people think, well, he's 27. You know, you've got 5 years of him being quality. No, you don't. Midfielders tend to be out of their peak by 29. And that doesn't mean that they're just completely done, but it means that you're paying them up until they're 32 for years that they're in decline. And at the end of those decline years, you have an asset that's worth considerably less than you paid for. Plus, I don't know. Are Arsenal going to win anything in the next 4 years? Probably not. Like, what they need to be doing over the next 4 years is building a squad that can then win something from kind of 2024 onwards. Like, that to me is the sensible move. And this is why I also don't like the idea of, well, they just have to keep Aubameyang no matter what. Why? Like, he's not going to win you anything next season. And as we've shown, we're not going to get back into the Champions League immediately, even with him. So with that in mind, you should say, what is our best prospect for long-term success? Is it to carry on giving overpriced contracts to older players, or is it to hang on to youngsters and really commit to developing them as best we can? Now, like I've said, this doesn't mean I'm totally against it, and I think that there are clubs who might offer us potentially enough money to make it interesting. Like, I don't know about you, but the Man United rumour I kind of rule out. I think they need a proper defensive midfielder. Guendouzi certainly isn't that now. Maybe he could turn into that, but it doesn't look like it anytime soon. Barcelona, I also don't really understand. Like, to me, he's like Frenkie de Jong, but worse in every aspect.
Yeah.
So I don't really get that either. PSG, I could maybe see. PSG always are linked to young, promising French talent. Not that they ever go for them, but I could see PSG maybe. Verratti's 27. A lot of the other players they have are like out and out defenders, you know, like Herrera, like Gay, like Marquinhos, who's played there. But again, I think that if he's not disciplined enough for Arteta, I doubt he's going to be disciplined enough for Tuchel. So where would you think would be the best landing spot for him of all these mooted options? Oh, because actually, the last one I was thinking about this at the weekend. I thought Guendouzi not in the Arsenal squad for the Spurs game. Ndombele unused on the bench. What would really make sense, if you could do it, would just be swapping those two players. Ndombele would be perfect for Arsenal. And Guendouzi, I could actually really, really see Mourinho liking him. I really could. Because he's a big guy, actually. And as he fills out, like, I mean, he's like 6 feet tall, or 6'1", but he weighs like 60 kilos. He's incredibly light. And so, but you do imagine that as he fills out a bit physically, he could turn into a real battleship in the middle of midfield. And I could kind of see Mourinho liking him in a sort of Sami Khedira role. But I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, the thing that stuck out from me on everything you just said is that Verratti's 27. I thought he was way older than that. That's crazy.
You thought he was older than that? Everyone seems to think he's still 24.
Verratti's been around for so long now. I think that's incredible that he's only 27. I mean, what a player. But of all those options, to be honest, I see your point about the swap with Partey. Probably doesn't make financial sense for Arsenal, and betting on you're basically betting on Guendouzi not turning into the player that he looks like he could be, which is actually a world-leading midfielder in a few years, whereas Partey is a very good midfielder now. I think he's been slightly overhyped by people in the last month or so. I mean, most players that are linked to Arsenal end up being slightly overhyped.
Sure.
But I think Guendouzi at Atleti, I could see really working well, just because his work rate is phenomenal, and if Simeone could sort of harness his sort of ill-discipline positionally and love of a crunching challenge, although Simeone would probably want to keep that going, then I could really see him doing well at Atleti over a period of 5 to 6 years, and at that stage they'll have a very sellable asset. Because players at Atletico Madrid, they're routinely involved in the latter stages of the Champions League. They're always competing, vaguely at the top of La Liga. Their players always have a very high sell-on value. We've seen them buy really badly in the last couple of years in Diego Costa and Vitolo and players like that, but they've actually sold very few of their players because they signed them down to these enormous contracts with massive release clauses. So Guendouzi could be a really smart investment for Atleti, and if he's available people are talking about between 20 and 30 million pounds this summer, because Arteta's so keen to get rid of him, and it just seems like this sort of it is done for him at Arsenal. So he could be an absolute steal for Atleti and Simeone, and I'd love to see the sort of player that he could turn into under the Argentines' tutelage.
I also think it would probably benefit him from going into a squad like that, where nobody cares about you, you're not important, you're incredibly young, they're super together and organised and united and disciplined as a squad. And I think that he could really benefit from going somewhere like that, where Emery was kind of known both at PSG and at Arsenal for not really having control over the dressing room. And in that setting, you can imagine a slightly arrogant 19, 20-year-old becoming a bit of a problem. Whereas at Atletico Madrid, with the combination of Simeone and the players he'd have around him, you just imagine that any sort of dickishness would get slapped out of him pretty quickly. Like, you've got to imagine that those guys would have absolutely no tolerance whatsoever for Guendouzi coming in and thinking that he was God's gift. And that's probably a good thing for him. Arteta's done it at Arsenal. Arteta's saying, we might well get to the summer and Arsenal don't sell Guendouzi, and it turns out that this was all Arteta saying, essentially to Guendouzi's camp, I'm willing to sell you if it comes to it. Just so that Guendouzi will kind of get his shit together. Because that is probably what he needs, to be told, no, you're going to do it my way. But he would also get that under Simeone as well, because Simeone's definitely not taking any shit from a 21-year-old.
100% no. And just to go back on one other team,